Welcome to episode 159 of the Amani Experience podcast. For this episode, we have George Tillman Jr. with us. George is a filmmaker, director, and producer. This episode was brought to us courtesy of MPI Southern California, Meeting Professionals International Southern California. We hosted a book club Q&A with George Tillman a few months ago. I was the person who had the pleasure of interviewing him, and the interview was phenomenal. Three of my favorite things from the interview: George was very honest and reflective during the whole chat. I just found that very refreshing. He gave great advice for young filmmakers. Make sure you pay attention to what he said. It was just some really poignant advice. And finally, his thoughts on just how Hollywood continues to lack depth and what he's doing to try to change that. If you want to reach me, email me, podcast@amaniexperience.com. Feel free to join the Patreon, patreon.com/Amani Experience. And you can also follow me on all socials at Amani Experience. Please check out MPI Southern California at mpiscc.org. You can also check out my book, since it is a sponsor of the show as well. That is DJ's Mean Business. You can find it at any store where you buy your books, whether it's Barnes & Nobles, Amazon, Apple Books, Kindle. It's there. And like I said, the Audible version is coming soon. All right, let's get to the interview. I hope you enjoy it, and I will see you soon. Thank you for the introduction, Liz. I want to introduce our guest today. Our guest, George Tillman Jr., a Wisconsin native, is an American film producer, screenwriter, and director. Tillman is most notable for directing the film Soul Food in 1997, Men of Honor in 2000. He's also the producer of Soul Food, the series on TV, and the 4 films in the Barbershop series. I love these movies. Barbershop, Barbershop 2, Back in Business, Beauty Shop, and Barbershop The Next Cut. He also directed the 2009 biopic Notorious about the late Brooklyn-born rapper, the Notorious B.I.G. Most recently, he's directed the drama and produced the drama The Hate U Give. He was nominated for the Black Film Award for Best Director for Soul Food, and also nominated for the Black Reel Award for Best Director and Best Screenplay for Notorious in 2009. So I would like to welcome to MPI Southern California, George Tillman Jr., and say welcome to our chapter and welcome to our book club. My first question to you is, who is your favorite character on All My Children?
Oh, man, that's an old school question right there. You know what? I just remember a guy named Jesse, man. I just remember Jesse. Yeah. He's a character. He's a great actor. But I used to watch a lot of daytime drama with my grandmother. Yeah.
Right. So I remember that. I know that the directors and producers for All My Children actually sent you a script that you could look through. That was one of the first scripts you had, and you had actually sent them a plot change for the show. Do you remember the plot change that you suggested for them?
No, I don't remember the plot change, but I do remember it was really about just adding a little bit more excitement. There's a couple characters. Let Jesse do something a little bit more different. But that was great for me because I got a chance to see what a script looked like, like what to do an actual script. How do you write it? And that was the beginning stages of me really learning how to write. So All My Children is really sort of responsible for that.
Nice. One my favorite characters, of course, we like Erica Kane, Stuart and Adam, and then Kendall, which was played, when she first came on the role. I like that as well. So another question. What does the movie Cooley High mean to you?
Oh, yeah. Cooley High means a lot. It was actually the first movie that I actually saw in a movie theater. It was like 1975. I was at a summer school for my church. The church actually had a summer school. So every summer, my parents would put me in school, keep me busy. But, one day we had an outing. We went to a theater in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And it was just a beautiful film about friendship, seeing African Americans on film. It was just amazing. So that was a really big experience. And the director, Michael Schultz, was actually from Milwaukee as well.
Nice. I remember the movie and the song It's So Hard to Say Goodbye to Yesterday that came from that movie as well. In past interviews, you've spoken about there being a 20-year gap between The Boys in the Hood and then the next impactful film about race. Why do you feel that was the case, and where do you see this type of film moving forward in terms of more films being made?
Yeah, I just felt like at a time, Hollywood usually they do things by what is sort of popular, what is people seeing, what people want to see movies. And I always just felt like, instead of just going what's popular, why don't we go what is important? What are characters that we don't see? What is something interesting? You know what I mean? And that's some of the things that as a filmmaker, I try to keep stressing and keep continuing forward. And hopefully that will be able to change now that we have streaming services. Now we have many different TV shows and a lot of filmmakers of, people of color and women filmmakers. And I think that's very important to have a wide range of stories to be told.
Exactly. What inspired you to take on this project and direct and produce this film?
Well, I think it started because I was working on this TV show, Marvel. Luke Cage, a friend of mine's, Cheo, was the showrunner of that. So I was working in Brooklyn, and then this particular film, this book just came to me. And I was like, wow, how can I read this at night while I'm working on Luke Cage? But I read the first page, and the first page started off with Star going to this party in the Garden Heights neighborhood. And just the dialogue and the prose and how she spoke, it didn't feel like the same scripts that you see in Hollywood. It just felt something special. Angie Thomas' voice just had a special voice to it. And it just reminded me of my youth, in high school. I was at a homecoming party, and the shooting happened, and everybody sort of ran. And it just kind of reminded me of the neighborhood that I grew up in. It felt really real. But I just identified with this character and her predicament, and I got through the book very quickly. So I wanted to get on the phone with Angie, my first time ever meeting her. And usually it takes a little time to think about the themes and the story, what's the vision. But this was a book I just knew off the bat that I lived it for so long, especially the talk in the beginning of the movie, which is in the book. A little bit deeper in the book. We put it in the first scene in the movie. But I had that conversations for my uncles. I had that same conversations, for my father, how to react around a police officer and what do you do? And then being code switching, all those things I just never seen that before in a book. So I said, this is a movie that I got to do. I got to be a part of it. And that's how it started for me.
Interesting. I had a similar conversation with my dad as well, especially as I started to get older and, be able to drive and things like that. What was the hardest scene for you to direct in the movie?
The hardest scene was definitely Khalil's shooting. I think, prior to that, Philando Castile happened in Minnesota. And, he was shot and killed right in the car with his family there. And I just felt like this is a big responsibility, This has happened for decades, for centuries. How do you get across police brutality or racism? How do you do it in a way? And how do you do it in a way where audience would never, ever experience that? How would they be able to understand? So I knew at the beginning was I have to shoot this in Star's point of view, because in the book, it was always first person, how Star is actually talking. So that means when I shot the scene in subjective point of view, I never got outside of the car when the police approached. I stayed with Star. What does it feel like to be pulled over with a blinding light behind you? What it feels like that you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know why you're being pulled over. And also you there and you don't even really see the officer face because he's halfway looking in. And these are all the things that you worry about. And you're being taught what happens when you get pulled over by a police officer. So I didn't really shoot it outside. I just stayed with Star, stayed her point of view until the shooting happened. And it was very emotional. We shot it over 2 days. I believe it was 2 days. And it was just tough emotionally for Manila, who plays Star. And it was just a tough scene. You just want to make sure you get it right. You want to make sure you get it where people can understand that these are real people, these are real events. And that was one of the toughest scenes to shoot.
There was a point in that scene where there's a look on the cop's face and there's a look on Star's face where he's like, uh-oh. How were you able to properly communicate what you wanted from them both in that scene? Because those looks, that stuck with you for the rest of the movie. What kind of techniques did you use to really communicate that with them so that it could have impact on the viewers?
Well, I think one of the most important thing as a director is you want to always have the audience, you always want to have the actors in the moment, not acting, reacting off each other. That comes with rehearsals. That comes with knowing the character, the conversations between myself and the actors. They never met the police officer until we shot that scene, that actor that played the police officer. Also, I had discussions with the police officer a little bit where the limitations of what police officers are being taught, some of the racist techniques that's being brought down from centuries to centuries. But also, this is a young man, and he reacted right off of race. He just thought immediately this guy's African American, he's going for a gun. But immediately he recognizes his mistake. Still, the mistake is done, but he recognizes he's human. You know what I mean? And that's what the story is about: is being able to explore racism and why systematic racism. And that was a moment where the actors were being human in that moment, and the idea that this kid could die, and that look was very important. I'm glad that you pointed that out because that's one of the second most important beats in the whole story. And that was where the story completely changed at that point.
Definitely. There's another scene I wanted to ask you about. When you at the restaurant, they're having a happy moment because I think Star had just gone and talked to the grand jury, and then they're in the restaurant, and then someone else comes and there's an altercation and the cops come and almost arrest Star's father. And so when the officers look at Star and they're like, you're the witness. You're the witness. How are you able to effectively portray that scene? Because that was also very powerful.
Yeah, again, that was a moment of what police officers are taught. And in that scene, there's a white police officer and there's an African-American police officer. So they both are taught the same thing. They go think differently, but they're taught the same thing about a system. So we feel in an area is immediately they feel that, Mav, the father and husband, is doing up to no good. That's the first immediate reaction. And things don't change until they recognize who this person is, because police officers and it was inside that, in a community so small like that, they all know. They know and they talk among each other. But that was a moment to break up the ideal of just because the guy's African American, he's doing something bad. And that's the moment that we wanted to be able to capture.
Interesting. I'm going to go back to the first scene we discussed, the most powerful scene in the movie. And Kathy Black-Lee from our audience has a question. If you shot that scene today, would you change anything at all?
The first scene of the talk, no, I wouldn't change anything because that was a talk that I heard, in the 70s, in the early 80s. And the same talk where probably my father heard when he was, from Mississippi. He lived in Mississippi. That was not very far from Emmett Till. He was 7 years old with Emmett Till. How do you talk? How do you act? What are you supposed to do? Those are the rules that we are taught and learned early. It doesn't change. What possibly would change is the personality of how it's said from the teacher. But the words doesn't change because over decades, the race and racism is the same as it was, 50, 60 years ago. So I wouldn't change anything, probably the personality. What I did about this scene was very important is the young kids that is in that playing the younger Star in Seven. That is the first time they heard those words out of that actor's mouth.
Interesting.
And that is there. I didn't rehearse that with them. I wanted to get the true initial response that you get when you hear that as a kid. And that's what I felt is like, when as a kid and you hear that, you're like, huh, what?
Yeah.
Really? I'm really different than other people around me? You mean something? And then the words of the tone is being said to you. It doesn't really register. It's like, I can die over this, you know? And as a young kid, that's the reaction I wanted. And you just stuck, but it never leaves you. That's what I wanted to get across. And if I would have rehearsed that scene, okay, guys, this was good. Nah, let's get the real true feeling. And being they were African-American young kids, it's inside you that you felt something, you know, that you're supposed to pay attention.
The follow-up to that is, would you change anything for the scene when Star witnesses her best friend getting murdered by the cop?
No, I wouldn't change a thing. I just felt like I try to really take my time in that scene. That scene is a combination of sort of three different things. Two friends who haven't seen each other in a while, and two friends who are actually have this thing for each other. There's a love for them. And they only have this one scene together. So I want the audience to experience this, because we all know what it's like to be young and in love. We always know to have that feeling, to be with a childhood friend that you just love. And they're innocent. They're just together. And I wanted to establish that before they get pulled over. And I just really, more than anything, I wanted to make sure that I had the time to do it. Usually when you make films in Hollywood, they want you to speed up things. They want you to make things faster. They really think the audience is going to get bored of just dialogue or just hearing people talk. We just want action. That's not true. People just want characters. Let's have them have a conversation so the audience can lean in and like we're listening for the first time. So I'm really happy how that scene played between those two.
Why do you think Hollywood is like that in terms of wanting things to speed up and want action and less dialogue, less depth, if we're being honest?
You know what, man? It's been like this for so long, man. And it's getting more because they always feel like action and, you know, a lot of films we see, you know, the big action tentpole movies, that's what people want to see. But really the great tentpole movies are like when you got character, you know. I remember when I was in film school and I was just my first year, and I go see all kind of movies, you know what I mean? I go see French New Wave stuff, and then I'll go see commercial. And I remember I was so happy when I saw Die Hard with Bruce Willis, the action movie. But really, I found out why I really liked the Bruce Willis action film movie, because they spent, you know, 20 minutes just talking about him and his family, and he just wanted to get his family on the plane. It was character. And that's why action movies are really great. The great ones, you know, like Collateral or Heat, because you got character underneath it. So I wish they understand. But I start figuring it out. The truth of it is some people in Hollywood don't know how to write character. They get paid a lot of money, don't know how to do it. You know what I mean? So that's what I feel.
How have you acquired the skill to write character? Because it's evident in all of your movies. How have you acquired that skill, which is quite difficult?
Well, I think for this particular film, Angie Thomas was the basis for this, man. The book was just some powerful scenes in the book and the writing. And I think it always come down to writing. Like my first film, Soul Food, I'm not really a writer. I wrote that movie just to get into the film business. And I always tell people, you know, you have a lot of power when you're a writer, and we all have stories in us. And that was my story. That was my family. I was a young boy, and I used to watch my grandmother and my aunties cooking Sunday dinners, and we were close when we cooked. That was the story. And what happens when you're not close? That was just a story in me, and I wrote it. And I'm really bad at grammar. I'm bad at all those things, but I had the story. And I think you have a true story. People recognize character. They can see these people are real. So I always tell people to write, to not be afraid. It really can happen. It happened for me. I remember in college, my college professor said I would never sell anything in Hollywood because of my grammar. That was so cruel. I was so determined. but I really believe you just got a story. I give it my work to a grammar teacher, and they correct my grammar.
There
But
you go.
the story.
Exactly. If you were to see that same college professor now, based on your success, what would you say to them?
You know what, man? I'm the kind of person, man. My wife is different. She'd be like, "Hey, how you doing? Remember me?" She'll let them know. I'll just walk away. There it is.
Okay.
That's why I guess that's why we still married.
There you go. Smart man. Happy wife, happy life. I get it. So we have another question from the audience that people are really intrigued about the specific scene. So I love this question from Christine Hartman. Hello, Christine. How are you? She asks, can you talk about the choice to change the content of the confrontation in front of Maverick's grocery store after the grand jury decision, i.e. Sakani with the gun, which didn't take place in the book?
Yeah. Yes, that was a really good thing that's three things that we slightly added to the book, which was move the talk in the first scene because the talk was later, a little bit later. And the ideal of that confrontation, not everybody would understand the hate you give and what Tupac analogy meant. Not everybody would get it. I knew it because I'm a big Tupac fan. I'm a hip hop fan. I knew it. I heard these for so long, but I wanted everybody to see this film. So the writer just came up with the idea of let's put this together in a scene and explain it. And their star says, "Here we are, right here, right now. The hate you." She explains it, and we'll see how it affects young kids, how it affects him, how it affects Star, the police officer, the guys in the neighborhood. And I just thought it was brilliant when she put that together. And I knew I can shoot it really well. The most important person I wanted to know it was okay for was Angie. And then Angie was like, "This is great. I'm cool with it." And I think that's very important, that sometimes as a filmmaker and as a writer, if you're adapting, is to bring something to the table that you can just wrap it up cinematically. That's what film is, a cinematic experience.
Excellent. So you mentioned two things that you kind of added to the book. What was the third thing that you added?
The other thing that we did is we started off explaining the worlds of Star. We see her in Garden Heights, and then we go to her school.
Yes.
Before we go to the party. We did that early on so the audience can have a cinematic experience of what code switching is really like.
Yes.
Even today, even to 97 when I first started in Hollywood, when you go in and pitch, you can't be too Milwaukee, North Side. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you gotta change it up and just be cool, not lose yourself. But initially, that's what you become. You becoming to change yourself for someone else, and that was the movie about, is be yourself. And I had a question for Angie. I said, at the end of the movie, Star ends up with Chris, the white guy. What side is she choosing, Garden Heights or? And then Angie said something I love. She can be both.
Yes, you can.
And this long as it's just you. And I thought that's the message. So that's what we did, was the third thing.
Yeah. I'm happy you brought up Chris and Angie. Explain your vision for the scene when Star's father beats her boyfriend, Chris, who is white, for the first time, and just how that came about, because that was well done. And I could just see that happening in many households across the country. So explain to you or us kind of how that came to be.
Yeah, that was interesting because when I was developing the script, that scene was in there, and the studio was like, script is like 127 pages, 128 pages. You always want to be 120 or under 120. So I cut the scene. I just cut it out. And I remember Amanda, reading the draft. "George, what happened? You cut the scene. What happened?" I said, "We don't have enough time." And then she started going, and then the studio's like, "Let's put that scene back in. We may need it."
Yes.
And I didn't know it was going to be that funny or worked out that the way it worked out, but my actors were so dialed in, and that I didn't really move the camera. I shot it with just really two angles. The camera gets them out of the limousine, and we follow them all the way around, and then we see them inside the house. And really what it is investment in the characters. We know who Mav is. We know what he stands for, and we understand what Chris is, and it's just about the characterization. The weirdest thing about that scene, which is I had to shoot that scene twice because we had, after the movie was done,
Yes.
one of the actors, the first actor that played Chris, said, we found out he said some racist things on the internet from 6 years ago. I didn't know, nobody knew, and it just popped up. And the film was sort of really in a great shape. It was cooking. I was really proud of it. And then I realized, oh man, this guy said this. And years ago, studios would probably let it go. Fox was just so behind the movie when they saw it. This is no way we can let this guy be in our movie. So what we have to do, we got to reshoot. Let's do it. And Amanda was on vacation from doing 2 movies back to back. She was in Japan. So I had to call her back and get her back in. And it was devastating for her because she had to go through all those emotions, you know what I mean, again. And, but we got through it, and KJ Appa just killed it.
Yeah.
Yes. It was like a whole nother thing lifted. So I was really happy for that.
I want to ask about another scene, but you brought up something else that kind of came to mind. How has current events, specifically what happened yesterday with the lack of indictment in Louisville, Kentucky, how is that affecting your future projects and your role as a filmmaker and a director?
It's definitely affecting things because I think people are now, because of our current situation over the last 7-8 months, people are listening, people are hearing. What it's really doing is really bringing more point of view of stick to what's true to you. Tell your stories the way it should be told. And audience want to see things authentic. They want to see things real, nothing fake. And things are opening up where now to tell our stories or a Latin story or Asian story, now let's get those filmmakers to tell our own stories. And now it's relentless now. It's like part of that is moving into creativity, which is no, I'm gonna just tell it the way it's meant to be told. And I think people are now seeing that because we have time to see it. It's on our news. We're not going anywhere. It's not driving every day to work. It's there. You cannot confront it. And I think that's sort of what is moving into the creative world.
So a parallel scene in the book, the grand jury scene, was particularly interesting and very powerful. I would love to know your perspective on how you were able to convey such emotion in that scene, and just what was the mindset in terms of when you were making that scene?
I think the key to that scene was at that time, Star found her voice. She was willing to do it, not knowing later what that ramification would be with King. And it was just one of those moments. It was just, I just remember seeing Khalil in the stand. We put him there in the stands as she's talking to him. And it just became really emotional for me because, he really played Khalil really. I just feel like he was so real. So when I saw him in the stands, it was just so emotional. It became emotional for her. And that's what it is. It's about standing up and speaking for those who can't speak. And I think that's very important, to talk to those who history has been lost. That's what that scene really, really meant. And it was so much that I slowed the film down and I just kept it on her most of the time,
Yeah, well done. Question
Thank you.
from our audience, Deb Shepard. Hello, Deb. How are you? Have you found different reactions from viewers related to the gang versus gang violence as compared to, black versus police violence based on your movie?
Yeah, I mean, that was something too that came up was when King is arrested. That was something that was in the book. Everybody in the neighborhood brought it up. And there were some people, few people that had issues with that. Why do the king gets go to jail and the white guy gets off? And
Yeah.
I'd always said two things. I said it was in the book, and I want to honor that. Two, that really what happens. It's just what happens. This is always the guys in the neighborhood that go, and then the
Yeah.
guys get off. We still seeing that today, obviously. And I just wanted to have that. But Angie had it in there for her. Just part of being in Jackson, Mississippi is we should stand up. We should sometimes stand up and say something is a problem on both ends. And I wanted to explore that and keep that in the film.
Exactly. As you look to future projects, are there any particular books that you would love to produce and direct a film from?
You know what? I'm involved in a film of the origin of Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, the Black Panthers in Oakland, that version of their story. That was based off of Huey Newton book and Bobby Seale. I've just been exploring a lot of history things, in history, and sometimes it finds me and I find it, sometimes it's not planned. And that's what I really didn't, the hate you give, it just came one day when I was in Brooklyn shooting another show, and it was just meant to happen. It was just meant to be there for me. And I just thought, sometimes you just got to follow things.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll encourage the audience to continue to put in questions in the chat. We love to take more. We got about a good 10, 12 minutes left with Mr. George Tillman Jr. In terms of being a creative, how are you able to keep your creative cup full when you spend so much passion, energy, and time on each project and have to bounce back and create more? What do you do to stay creatively full?
I always try to remember that feeling of what I felt when I first read something, when I first read Angie's book, because after 8, 9 months on something, and you get to hear no a lot too, oh, you can't go over budget, or you got to move faster. You hear no, and you're just trying to keep up. Making movies is so hard. So you always just try to remember, and I really, the strangest thing, I just go back to my grandmother and all my children, what I felt when that script came to me.
Yeah.
It's a privilege to do it. And I got to keep remembering that, because it is a business, and the business drags out of the fun out of it. So it's usually thinking about that, but also, younger storytellers or younger writers, just inspire when I see different things. So that is a constant every day.
Good.
Every day. I mean, it's a constant grind. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
To try to remember, I love this.
Yes, absolutely. We do have, and I asked this question in two parts, since you mentioned students and kind of growing. We have a large student audience that's participating today. What advice would you give younger professionals or students who want to get into the film industry? And also, the second part, if you could go back and talk to George Tillman Jr. when you were coming out of Columbia College in Chicago and give him advice based on what you know now, what advice would you give your younger self?
Well, the first question is that for young filmmakers, I really truly believe, if you have an idea, write it. Really do. Get somebody to help you write it. Nobody knows your story better than you. And it just could be so much profitable. And because I wrote Soul Food, because of that, when they didn't want me to direct the movie because I didn't have that much experience, I was like, it's my script. And then now, years later, when they talk about sequels or they want to do TV, it's just mine. It's there. It's just you always, that's part of you. that profit is always going to be there. And I always believe that's the case. If you don't have it yourself, you can always work with someone else. I think that's true to get to a place where you can have ownership. Another thing I think, as a filmmaker myself is, if I look back, I really tell myself, like I'm doing it now, just working more. I remember after my first couple of movies, I remember Spike came up to me and was like, "Get back to work. What's your next movie?" I was thinking to myself, and I was like, "Man, Spike do one movie a year. He does two a year. Like he doing TV shows." And I was always taking pride where I'm gonna take my time, and no, that's the time to do it. Do everything. Get in there. Do commercials, write stuff, get in there, get on stage, just be creative, you know what I mean? And it's just like, I just think having a body of work some way or another, just keep creating. It doesn't make any sense to wait. Like the reason I'm saying that, because I had an 8-year gap after Men of Honor, and I started producing, but I had 8 years between Men of Honor and Notorious, and most people are out of the business if you have that long of a gap. And I was younger, you know what I mean? I could have done so much and seen more places. And I always say, now I'm doing it because the love is there. I want to continue forward. I got stories to tell. But if a young person, there's no reason to sit back, especially now. You don't need film. You don't need 35, 16 millimeter. All you need is a camera. Yeah. You can get it done now, Mm-hmm. And it's not just 4 studios. Now you got streaming, you got Netflix. You know what I mean? I look at so many things on streaming, and there's so many movies. Like, there's so many shows I can't get through it. So it's like, this is the time creatively for us, for everyone. Yes.
And then advice to your younger self as you're coming out of Columbia College in Chicago, what advice would you give your younger self?
Just do more. That is it. Just
do more.
Do more. Don't settle. Keep staying creative, because the things I know now only knew by doing it. Reading books is not gonna just gotta do it. It's a media that needs to just get done. Just do it.
Love it. Love it. Kathy Black-Lee, thank you for the question. Hello, Kathy. She wants to know, has this project pushed you to do more social outreach on racism or social injustice?
Yeah, it really does. And more than anything, it makes me think about the projects that I have coming forth, filmmakers that I want to work with, or writers I want to work with. That's what I feel, which is my best weapon, is be able to offer that. And be able to help people get to that point, be able to bring material to places who are looking for things like that. So, and I think that's the key. I think that's the most important thing as a filmmaker that I like to be involved with.
Are you able to share any maybe writers or actors that you're really looking forward to working with in the future?
Oh man, there's so many of them. There's so many, so many. And, and the great thing about it is so many new individuals out there, it's just so many great actors that you get inspired by and want to work with. So it's hard to name just one. Yeah.
Well, let's see if we can do this. If you're going to pick maybe your favorite Biggie Small songs and your favorite Tupac songs, because this is a question from the audience. Sean Galloway. Hello, Sean. Thank you for your question. What songs come to mind?
You know what? I like the Tupac early, which I've been listening to lately, Holler If You Hear Me, which is like his first or second album. Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of early 90s, hip hop. With Biggie too, it's just warning, you know what I mean? Like,
what the hell is this?
Yeah, I really made sure, we shot the movie. I was like, that's all I kept talking about. This concert got to be great. I want him to come down there, so those are my 2 favorite songs.
Awesome. Cool. Angelica Arias. What's up, Angie? How are you doing? She says, if you were to come out with another project related to racism and social injustice, do you think it was based off someone's work or real life experiences, or could it be your story?
there's something that I'm working on that's based off real history, actually. In the 1900s, actually, something I'm excited about. Angie got a new book coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
We actually producing her second book on the come up, actually, which is about a young 16-year-old African American rapper in the rap scene,
Okay.
dealing with the internet and all these things. So I love her work and love her prose. It was a great relationship on A Hate You Give, and I'm just sort of connected to her words. So I'm looking forward to those two projects.
In the past, you've spoken about how there are kind of two different Hollywoods. There's a Black Hollywood, and then there's Hollywood. How have you been able to effectively navigate between both sides?
Well, I think that, to be honest with you, that key for me worked out for me in Men of Honor, because after Men of Honor, when I worked with Robert De Niro, we became really friends, and he's my favorite actor of all time when I was young and still in, and I learned so much from him. But it was a validation, so I would go and I would hang with him, and it would be a different world, you know what I mean, compared to the world of all African. It was just a different thing, and he was always supportive of African Americans in terms of creativity, and but I was seeing a difference at that point. It's just like, and back then at that time too, you have a African American budget, and then you have a different budget. A lot of that was based off stars, but it was really a big difference. And as a filmmaker, you just want to keep, have those lines become one. That's what you're hoping for. And I really believe now with TV, it's starting to get better because we have a lot of successful African American showrunners,
Yes.
all the way from Power, and from all the way the network, and now it's starting to creep over into the feature world. So that's something I'm proud of seeing, that progress.
When you think back to the mentors you've had and all of the wisdom that you've attained from other people, what would be the best advice that you've ever received?
Yeah, I think the best advice was the first person who ever took me out after seeing my movie and meeting me was John Singleton, and after he saw Soul Food. And, he was one of the best early mentors because he was so successful. I loved all his movies. And he never let other people get to him or like yeses or nos. He just kept moving. And he was just amazing. I remember I always remember this. We were at an event and we were in Acapulco, and somebody stood up and said, hey, I got an idea for a movie, and then I remember John saying, and I was shocked. He was like, no, man, I don't want to hear no idea for a movie. He says, I don't want to hear an idea, man. Write it.
Oh.
He says, write it, man. Everybody here on this panel wrote a movie, and you can do it. And then that guy I remember seeing later had a film like 2 years later. Yeah. I thought it was really tough. I like, man, you gonna say that, John? But it was actually true, because it's hard to say you have an idea, and it's hard to say I want to direct if you haven't did a short, you haven't done a film. It's hard for me as a producer to sell to other people. You know what I mean? So you got to have something, and that's part of being creative, and stay creative. That's the key.
Have you ever had to deal with imposter syndrome? And if so, how were you able to navigate through that and still keep moving forward?
Imposters?
Imposter syndrome.
No, I never had to deal with that too much.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right, good, good. You're lucky. So, bless you. Haley Powers has a question from the audience. Thank you, Haley. Good to see you here. She says, in the early 70s, there were many college classes in Black Lit and the Civil Rights Movement. Do you think that has slowed down currently in the academic world?
I'm going to be honest, man, the academic world, I don't know if I'm the guy to answer that. I went to a film school,
Yeah. Well, maybe another way of asking is that, do you think, well, now it's a little different, but how do you look at how we're learning about different races in the educational system now compared to when you were coming up?
Yeah, that's huge, because my son, he's 17. And, he's learning a little bit more than I did. I didn't know, well, they didn't teach us any African-American things. But in the 70s and 80s, man, it was like MLK. And we didn't really get to MLK till like college, till I took a Harlem Renaissance class, in my college year. So just imagine the 70s, 80s, all the way up to like 87. I graduated college 91. So it's like, can you imagine that nothing was taught? And my kid is starting to get more of that, but it's not to the extent and it's not the whole story. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. I really believe we need more of that. It just needs to happen because, he's a creative individual, so where do you get these stories from? How can I get a script that is amazing about a man in the 1900s and I didn't know anything about what he did? I didn't know, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, I never heard of this guy and he did these amazing things that really connected with me, scripts now that's floating around, the Black Wall Street, Tulsa. We didn't teach none of that. A lot of the stuff I learned through college up. So can you imagine, this is history that says a lot about who we are and a lot of stuff where we were can teach us who we are now. All that can be able to improve. Only reason I know that because I know some of the text that my son bring home and what he has to study, So I just think those things can be stronger.
Amazing. I guess we're coming to about 5:50, so we want to be respectful of your time. Maybe my last question to you would be, what continues to inspire you to continue to move forward, creating these impactful pieces that you did, such as The Hate U Give? How are you continuing to stay inspired and keep moving forward?
What keeps me inspired is, just like finally, being able to do stories that really mean something, like The Hate U Give. It was a good experience for me. It was a very tough and emotional experience, but it's very rewarding, And at the time, when it came out, I was like, man, I wish more people would have seen the movie, because it came out, it was always every film I do is always, they come out on the weekend where somebody's making $100 million, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then when I go and produce like a barbershop movie, which is, and I produce it, it takes comedy, you know what I mean? To get and so it's always a struggle, like the movie we executive produced, Mudbound, it was like 5 years to get that movie made. Yeah. It just took a long time. And then another director came on, did a great job. So it's always the tough one. So when you finally get through and you break it through, it's so rewarding.
Yeah.
And despite box office and despite those things. So, and it means something. So that's what keeps me going. Now, at the moment, I feel like it's a time there's things to be said. And that's very inspiring as well.
Love it. Any last words of wisdom or advice? I always love to ask guests that, just, in terms of being a creative. For us working in the media and events field, our industry has been devastated by the pandemic. So we're kind of on the rebound now, not yet, but we're kind of headed that way. And I know that you've had to deal with a lot of ups and downs in your career. So any advice on being resilient in times like this for us as we move forward?
Yeah, only thing I can say is that, we all have, ideas and a point of view and voices. And when it relates to being creative, there's always people who are above us who's responsible or paying or financing. The truth is a lot of those people don't know. And the truth is that, especially in Hollywood, we're looking for new voices, fresh voices, not the same stories. And in being in Hollywood, you're in a bubble. So the real world is out there, and these new voices and these new creative, strong point of views, fresh ideas, that's what we need. And I just want to encourage that, things happen for a reason. So a lot of things I look back at my career and like, I should have done that, should have done this. Things happen for a reason. And I just, like, the truth of it is I just kept going, because there wasn't nothing else for me to do but this. So I just want to keep, inspiring and saying that, you guys are very, these new ideas and these new thoughts is very encouraging for the system, and we need them.
Amazing. Well, on behalf of our entire chapter, MPI Southern California, I want to thank you for your time. It's been an honor to have you as a guest for our book club and for our chapter. And we hope to stay in touch, and just thank you for your wisdom and sharing your stories with us.
Thank you very much. I'm good. I'm glad that I was able to do this. The first 5 minutes, I couldn't see myself or you. It just popped back up.
Good. Well, there you go. But it was great.
Thank you for listening to the Amani Experience podcast. You can check out the show notes on amaniexperience.com/podcast. Please remember to leave us a review on the platform you're listening on, and share this podcast with anyone who you feel would benefit from listening. See you soon for our next episode.